I've been working in land development and subdivision projects since 1988.
See, I told you, folks, he's got more years of experience than all of us combined.
I started my career in Northern Virginia. I spent about 30 years there. Now I live in St. Augustine, Florida. Currently, I have 19 active projects in 11 states. Most of the work that I do is large entitlement subdivisions, but I've done my share of small subdivides. I've helped people with exempt subdivisions, and I'm happy to discuss the ins and outs, the opportunities that lie there, or and any questions anyone might have.
Yep. Awesome, Dave. Well, let's jump in because I know I've got some questions for you.
Okay.
And I think this one is an interesting one to start with because I hear this word being interchangeably used all the time. And it might sound really simple, but what's the difference between a subdivide and an actual entitlement?
Several things, and they could all fall in and be an entitlement as well. Technically, an entitlement is any action that on a piece of property that it expends the value, that adds value. So a simple subdivision, taking one lot into two, when it's approved, you technically have an entitlement. You're entitled now to build two structures rather than one, two sewer connections, water connections, and the like. I think part of it is there's a difference between simple subdivisions, rural subdivisions, and exempt subdivisions. So I know many of the states have different provisions to allow for an exempt subdivision. For example, the state of South Carolina, it's 5 acres and minimum frontage, and you can subdivide without having to go through the subdivision process. You just have a surveyor lay out the lots, create a plat, and take the plat to record. I want to say in Texas, it's 10 acres. Virginia, it's 10 acres. And now that isn't necessarily anywhere in the state. A lot of times it's in unincorporated areas because most incorporated areas have zoning.
Yep, correct.
And with zoning comes required standards that you have to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone was just starting out, David, and they wanted to know all of those exemptions and where to find out in which state is what the size could be, what the road frontage could be, where would they start with finding out all of that information?
I'm going to recommend our good friend Mike Marshall, because I know that Mike put together a list of all the states and what their requirements are. So there's a shout out to Mike.
And for any of you who don't know Mike Marshall, if you want me to personally introduce you to him, just drop me an email. I know Mike really, really well. He does have that list and it is very useful. Yeah, really good guy.
He's a good guy. If someone doesn't want to reach out to Mike, you'll usually find it in the subdivision standards in a particular, in any jurisdiction. Go to a jurisdiction in a county jurisdiction in Texas, and if you look under their subdivision standards, it's usually in the beginning where it explains what constitutes subdivision for that particular county, and where the allowances for for exempt subdivisions fall.
Yeah, love it. Okay, awesome. And so let's talk about identifying a good subdivision. What's some of the criteria that you use, Dave, to really understand, yep, this is a subdivision opportunity here and it ticks all the right particular boxes? What's your process? Walk us through your process that you go through.
Yeah, that's a good question. Part of it is frontage, because no matter what you do, imagine that you had a 3-acre lot with 1 acre zoning, but you only had 50 feet of frontage. So you have one building lot, where if that parcel were turned sideways and you had 3 acres with with 500 feet of frontage, and you could carve it up into 1 acre lots with adequate acceptable frontage, then that's an opportunity to subdivide. I think that's something that catches a lot of people is they look at the acreage, they look at the zoning and think immediately it's a subdivision opportunity. And while it could be, if the jurisdiction permits private access or shared entrances, but in most cases, they frown on those because no one knows who's it actually also takes it away from a simple subdivision, because to do that, you need a deed to know who owns or will maintain the access.
The access, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there
So anytime
situations
you
where
need a
you
deed, it kind of takes you away from a simple subdivision.
got it? Have you actually ever seen ones that have worked well, where you've got a number of different owners around, and that deed is all of them own that access right?
Yes.
And so it's worked, right?
Many times. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But again, it takes it away from the idea of a simple subdivision into kind of the next step. So you can either plat a right of way or plat an easement, an access easement, and have multiple shares off of that, depending on what the jurisdiction allows. There are jurisdictions in, I'll use Loudoun County, Virginia as an example. Anything less than 7, you can do it off a private access easement. So you could carve 7 lots off of a private access easement, but it's no longer a simple subdivision because you have a plat and a deed and then covenants and restrictions because of the common access.
Got it. Excellent. Good information, Dave. Good information. Guys, as we're going here, please put anything in the chat box. Any questions you've got for Dave, or put your hand up and I'll bring you off mute. Because as you can tell, Dave's got a lot of information to share, and I think that that's a really good distinction there. Dave, you've done lots of these stuff, lots of these subdivisions, lots of these deals, 19 current projects on the go. What are some of the gotchas that you've seen where you're partway through a deal and it's like, gotcha, this is now bringing the deal undone, or things that are, perhaps not seen at the surface that when you dig further, it becomes problematic?
Yeah, well, for me, I always try and make sure that I have enough of a study period to get through, anything that could possibly pop up. But that said, there's always, I've worked with folks where we were doing an exempt subdivision in Texas, actually. And when in talking with the surveyor, he mentioned that we should probably talk to the TxDOT rep regarding our entrance spacing. It was an odd thing because we had frontage on a state road and then frontage on a county road, and we were trying to utilize both. But the interesting thing was, because of some other entrances not on this property, and a curve in the road that compromised sight distance, we almost ended up losing a lot because we couldn't get the requisite number of entrances in, even though we have plenty of frontage. And because there's a required separation between entrances for state roads versus county roads. Now, luckily the rep in that area was okay with us creating 2 shared entrances and then private beyond the right of way. But that could have been an issue had the exempt subdivision gone through, sold lots, one guy put an entrance in, and all of a sudden the guy that bought a lot next door couldn't get an entrance because of the separation.
Yeah.
So, so that's one where there are a lot of there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And what may work, again, the difference between a county road and a state road, the separation between entrances, what permits will allow. Some jurisdictions don't like shared entrances. They want to make sure you got to have individual entrances and they all have to meet the separation. So those are, like I said, there's a lot of moving parts, even though they seem rather simple. And in the case of of an exempt subdivision, you don't go through a platting process. So the county, no one sees it until it goes to record, and you send it into land records to get PIN numbers and addresses. And then all of a sudden, someone files the first entrance permit, and some others may not be able to.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a big gotcha if you're the one that's later in the race, should we say, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it creates a very libelous issue if you sell somebody something and they don't have access.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the gotchas, obviously access, and making sure that depending upon how many lots you're splitting, that access is okay for everyone. What are some of the other gotchas that you've seen over your time?
Well, a lot of times it's, I'm helping some folks right now. It's slightly different, but water and sewer taps. If you're in an area that allows water and sewer, and you're banking on the fact that this 3-acre lot can be 3 1-acre lots, and it's going to have public water and sewer, and all of a sudden, you go through all the way through the process, and you take your subdivided plan down to the utility department, and they go, yeah, we're not issuing taps there any longer, or we've exceeded capacity already, so we're not providing any additional taps. That is probably, one of those paramount moments where early in the process, you're speaking with the utility departments and making sure that
Go for your receipt.
Yeah.
Right. I'll just mute James. Yep. Continue, Dave.
Yeah. Making sure that you've got what you think you have before you spend money on creating something that's that you can't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. So access, taps, what else?
Well, I same thing with regard to if you don't have water and sewer, and you're working with drain fields and wells, you need to know what the separation requirements are between a drain field and a well, between a drain field, a well, and a house, a minimum lot size. I know a lot of jurisdictions might say, oh, it's a drain field and a well, and the minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. But then what you find out is, because of all the separations that you have, you can't get a drain field and a well and a house on a 20,000 square foot lot. You need to be an acre.
Got it.
And all of that, that changes the process. I think that may be one of the ones where I see people make the most mistakes, is thinking that, okay, I can do 20,000 square foot lots, so I can have this many lots. However, with drain fields and wells, I can't get them on a lot of that size.
Yeah. Yep. Is that where you'd normally go to an engineer to make sure that that's all looked at correctly?
Well, so the engineer can give you all of the parameters, but the reality is, if you're dealing, and I know a lot of people don't like to, and it also depends on where you are. In Georgia, Virginia, North Carolina, you actually have to have your drain fields. If your lot is a certain size, you have to have your drain field soil test done and permit issued before you can record a plat on it.
Got it. All of these little things, right? Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to start with quickly. It's very similar to me. It's very similar to the discussion we had with regard to wetlands, where you can get I call it a desktop wetlands done with a wetland scientist, because he looks at those things. It's what he looks at before he goes out in the field to flag the wetlands. And it is very much the same with a soil scientist. The soil scientist, before he goes out in the field to try and find your drain fields, he's not going out like hunting and pecking. He knows where he's going. So most of the soil scientists I work with in multiple states, they can give you a rough map, a rough idea of whether or not, or they can look at the soils, they can look at a number of things and go, yeah, we're not going to have problem finding drain fields there, or you know, we really need to identify all these drain fields before we get too much further, because you may or may not have enough good soils to accommodate the lots you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yep. Very interesting. So we've got a couple of things there, guys. We've got access issues, we've got taps and water, we've got drain fields, and whether it's a sewer versus a well and things like that. Any other major gotchas that you've seen, David?
Let me think. Many times from from an analysis standpoint of value is the difference between what some would consider a finished lot and a raw lot. And just papering a lot many times does not convey the same amount of value as if it was cleared and pad ready and the well was drilled and you had your drain field permit, or even if you're on a spot where you have access to public water and sewer, but imagine that the sewer line is in the middle of the road and the water line is on the other side of the road, and you're looking at lots that someone, you know, subdivided, but they already had the lateral pulled over to the lot, and they had the water line out front. So the delta between having to do that work of open cutting the road to install a sanitary lateral and pulling a water line across the road changes the delta on the value of the lot.
Yeah, 100%, big one. So Shahar, and I don't know if I'm saying your name properly, is it Shachar? He's like, yeah, I've got one of those names too. No one ever gets right. But he's posted a good question in here. So what are the 5 most important things to search for in a new project? We'll start there.
Oh, 5? You know, it depends on what you're looking for in a project. For me, I'm looking for a parcel of substantial enough size to subdivide. Generally, I'm always looking for water and sewer. 3 builders, the national builders, or searchable regional builders. Access. And I guess maybe at the same thing, utility availability.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So that's the top 5 things you're looking for. The next part of the question is, what are the 5 most important things to check after we find something? Shahad, do you want to come off mute and just explain that question a little bit? What do you mean by after we find something? You mean after we find a problem, or after you find a lot that you go?
We found a lot or something like a parcel.
Yep.
We want to subdivide. What do we need to check other than the 5 things you just said?
So once you've found something that meets that criteria, what's the next 5 things that you'd probably go into? Yep.
I'm probably looking, depending on the size of the parcel, I'm looking at zoning. I'm looking at current land use and future land use.
Yeah. Do you start to do any due diligence at that stage, David, on what houses are selling for in the area?
You know, that's a great question. I don't necessarily, I do, to the standpoint of, I like to see what's listed and kind of what the value is, and possibly what things are selling for. I also, one of the things that I always do is I do a Google Earth Street View. I like to see if an area that I'm looking at is, you know, and I kind of grade things A through F. Is it an A community or area, or is it a C, a D, B? And all of those you can discern from dropping in at Street View, going up and down the road, looking at the existing homes, looking at the care people take. I'm trying to think. Next, as far as what things are selling for, I generally shy away from that, except for very surface, because I'm really looking at I'm mainly trying to find the name of a new home community nearby, and then I'll go to that website and I'll see what their start price is, because the start price is what the builder predicates everything on. Anything that they're getting more than their start price is because their salesman was good and was able to, ratchet up extras or bonus rooms or things of that nature. So when a builder is doing their pro forma on a site, it's what are we going to start the project at, not what are we probably going to sell homes at.
Got it.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
just,
a good
again,
distinction.
I look for I look for 5 new homes and click on that and see if it says what the name of the subdivision is, and then go search that and see what those homes are starting at.
Yeah, nice one, David. Linda's got a question in here. Will most builders accept well and septic, or must there be water and sewer? So should we focus more on that?
It depends on where you are. If well and septic are the rigor, then the builders will build with well and septic. They will price accordingly. Because a well and a septic system are generally going to be slightly more expensive than tap fees. And
Definitely.
and it's a different buyer. But it may be just the area where you are. If everything's well and septic, then it's generally accepted. The builders prefer water and sewer.
But it doesn't mean it's a deal killer.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it saves them steps of education. There are certain things you can and cannot flush into a septic tank. There are certain things that you can and cannot do on a well. If you like a lush green yard and you're going to water out of your well, you run a really good chance of depleting it and having to wait for long times for it to recharge. So, so a well and septic house requires the builder to educate his buyer more than a water and sewer house.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a really, really good distinction there. Jean's asked an interesting question here, and Jean, I'm really curious about this one too. David, what do you think the current market is like for subdividing these days? We're hearing a lot of stuff in the news about, the price, like tariffs and building costs and where the market's going. And, it's a bit topsy-turvy at the moment, but what's your informed view?
My informed view. My informed view is I have yet to see the builders start to pull back on any of my projects. As soon as I get one, I go to the builders. I'm getting the same reaction I got, forever. The thing to remember about, especially the national home builders or the big regional builders, they don't have a fallback position. They're builders. They don't wake up in the morning and go, maybe we should get into self-storage. They're home builders. So they figure out how to make the market work for them and make the dollars and cents work for them. And I will say this, within the last 2 weeks, I won't say I got retraded on a deal, but my developer came back to me and said, hey, the builder we had kicked out. They were at this. I actually referred another builder to him, and it's about a $2,000 a lot difference for us. But it was more from the original builder was speccing a more expensive house. The builder that's stepping in was honest. He came in, he goes, I'm not going to be in that. I can't hit that market. This is my niche. And it's a builder that I've sold stuff to a lot. So, I was like, okay, that's fine. We're still making money. It's not that I don't see that. I tend to, in the beginning, and I would recommend everybody kind of do this. I know there's that, oh my God, I got to make every penny off this. I'm of a school of thought where I know that every deal I'm doing, there's money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I'm comfortably priced wherever I am, but I also know that it's a good deal. I'm not, I don't, I don't, I don't over negotiate with the builders. I tell them what I'd like for the lots. They tell me where they are, and we come to a meeting in between somewhere, and I'm always fine with that. I've never pushed them to sharpen their pencil. I think I need more. I don't believe where you are. They know where they are. They know what the market is.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people like to think, oh no, they're just out to take advantage of me. Here's how I look at it. If I can sell, I'm trying to build relationships. I think everybody should be. And if the builder knows that every time he calls you or every time you call him, it's a struggle, you're not believing the price that he gives you, or whatever it is, I like to think that the way I do it, the builders take my call every time I call, because they know that at the end of the day, I understand where they've got to be, where the project's got to be. And I also know that if I can't make the deal work, I would kick it. If it were a builder deal, I'd kick it to a builder and go, I can't be a third party, but this is a deal that you can do.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. Just in the same vein of questioning, I'm curious at the moment, are you seeing some builders lean more towards more affordable housing?
You know, that's another, wow, it's a stunning question. You know, historically, when markets have dropped, what actually continues to move are that second move up house. You know, when I was in Northern Virginia, everybody said, oh, it's amazing that the market from like 650 to 950 was stayed strong even when everything else fell off. And I think the difficult thing with affordable becomes that market is squoze more by interest rates and down payments and what it actually costs just for the sticks and bricks versus that slightly above medium buyer who's not that much bothered by you know, by a couple extra points on the interest, or you know, or a larger down payment. So I see that upper middle market tends to stay a little more static or consistent than you know, than the way up. The way up, you know, again, when you get well over $1 million, depending on where you are, the interesting thing there is you don't have to appeal to such a broad audience. Your audience shrinks. So, you know, you're not trying to find 1,000 people to sell 100 homes. You're trying to find 20 people to sell 5 homes. And that is a difference.
Good. Yeah, I like your thinking there. I do. Shahaz's got 2 more questions in here, which keep with the questions, guys. This is great. Are you finding most of your projects on or off market? And in the same question, when you do find one, what are the margins you're seeing right now?
Okay, most of my stuff is on market. I know that everyone goes, what? Like, yeah, it's on market. I help people that do that have off market stuff, but most of my stuff is on market. I find that, you know, I look for things that have been on the market a long time that make sense, and maybe I have a gift of gab. I find that I can have a conversation with a seller and explain to them why their property sat on the market for so long, what the real numbers. I'm not afraid of the real numbers, is the thing. I'm not afraid to show them to anyone. You know, AJ, if you called me with a piece of property and said, what do you think of this? I would give you all the numbers that I think it is. I'm not afraid to give that information, and I'm certainly not afraid to tell somebody. And I appreciate when they go, well, I think this. And we just walked away from a deal in just outside Memphis, Tennessee, where I told the seller, okay, I'll take your challenge. I'm telling you where I think it is, but you've got to be here. And I did all the due diligence I normally do. And I came up with 3 different sketches. I talked to all the builders. I had all the data. And when we kicked out, I went back to the seller and I went, here, if I were you, I would call this guy because he was the one that got closest to your number, but he's nowhere near your number. And I can't be either. But here's the reality of what's going on where you are. And this gentleman, he was lovely, but he still thought, he goes, well, I think it's, and I said, good for you. Congratulations that's where you are. That's what you think the value is. I'm telling you what I'm seeing and hearing from the builders and everyone in the industry.
Yeah. I think that
but I do, I work on market. I've been able to negotiate solid deals. And again, I explained to the sellers exactly what's going to take place, exactly how long I believe it's going to take, and exactly why I need the extensions or whatever we build into our contracts. And the other thing that I'm comfortable with is I don't have to do every deal. And it's walking away from a deal is better than trying to make something out of nothing.
Yeah, trying to make some or trying to force fit something, right? I always say that there's kind of like this universal, without sounding too woo-woo about it, guys, but this universal energy. It's like if you're trying to force something, maybe it's not worth it, right? So I think it's worth kind of listening into your intuition around how hard is this deal to do. Steve's got a good question in here that kind of just goes on from what you were mentioning there, David. How do you educate landowners who are wanting finished lot pricing for their raw land?
I honestly, you give it your best shot. You go in armed with the way it works in the real world, and the way it works is, if homes are starting in the 350s, then a paper lot is worth about 16 to 18,000. But what a builder will pay for a finished lot is 23% of their house start. And then you have the developer, even if it's a self-developing builder, they still pay themselves to develop the lots. And what they'd like to make is 20%, but they can back it down to 15. If it's a third-party developer, he wants to make 25, he'll back it down to 20, but those are pretty much hard and fast. And then just the hard cost of finishing. Right now, pretty much across the board, anywhere in the US, it's somewhere around $1,000 a linear foot, front foot, to finish a lot. So if you got a 50-foot wide lot, it's around $50,000 to finish it. Now that fluctuates a little bit depending on region. In Alabama, it may be $45,000 to do that 50-foot lot. South Carolina, it might be $42,000, but it's not that. It's a good enough estimate or guess to go right there.
Nice.
So so that's kind of where I start. And again, I'm not afraid to show the numbers, and I'm not afraid to show somebody that in order for me to buy your land and entitle it or take it through a process, it's going to cost me X.
Yeah. I think it's really good to be upfront about those costs, because a lot of property owners, in the back of their minds, they don't even realize what half the costs are, right? So that whole education process and doing it respectfully and saying, look, you might have seen a property down the road sell for X, but here's all the things that would have gone into making that deal happen. So and Linda's just put
I use a spreadsheet that for entitlement costs. And I'm happy to give that to them with my estimates. Like, here's my estimates. And I love to see the look on somebody's face, the big wide eyes going, the engineering is going to be $150,000. Yeah. It's about $1,000 a lot. If I've got 150 lots, it's 150 grand.
Yep. It all starts to add up, right? Linda's put a really good question in here, David, which is define what a finished lot is. Is that a horizontal development or a full vertical?
No, a finished lot is just that. It is a lot that is ready for a builder to start. So pad ready. So finished means that if it's a rural section, which is ditch and shoulder, that means the ditch is in, the driveway entrance is in, the culvert pipe under the driveway is in, it's gravelled back past the right of way, and the pad is graded to an elevation selected by the builder, and it's cleared and ready for them to drop off their building package and get started. A raw lot is just that. It is, it could have road frontage, but it still has all the trees on it. It hasn't been balanced. No one's come in. I mean, whether it needs 1 truckload of dirt or 15 is yet to be determined. It is just that. It is in a raw state and needs the horizontal work done.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe, David, in the interest of time, we've just got 15 minutes left. I'd love for you to walk everybody through, like, what's your most memorable deal from beginning to end? Talk us through, like, what you identified with the property, what you split, how you entitled it. Yeah, walk us through your most memorable one, Dave.
Well, I will say the one, and he may listen to this, Arturo might pay attention to this one. So I just got finished doing a deal with Arturo and his partner Emmanuel in it was in the beginning of this year in Alberta, Alabama. And the reason I go to that one is it was a classic example of, I don't want to say anything that could go wrong went wrong, but things happened that you would never in a million years prepare yourself for. I met them on a whim on a Facebook post, and I looked at the piece of property because they were listing it for sale, and finally I just said to them, "Why don't you guys entitle this? It's a perfect deal." And so they agreed to, and I acted as a consultant, and we thought it was going to be, well over 100 lots. At one point in the design process, it was 166 duplexes. That the developer that builder brought in decided he didn't like the deal. So I found another builder, but he only wanted single family detached lots. So we were down to 83 single family detached lots. At the end of the day,
just pause there for 1 sec. Literally, with a change of builder, the amount of lots got split in half.
Right, because he didn't want to build duplexes.
Yeah.
So, but the developer that the first builder brought in, who basically kicked out of the deal because he didn't like it, we were under contract with the other builder. He actually ended up assigning his contract to the developer that backed out of the deal.
Swings and roundabouts, my friend. Swings and roundabouts.
So that was a twist. The difference between the price, so we went from what was going to be $11,000 a lot for the 164 to $19,500 a lot for the 83. So not a huge juggle, but a juggle nonetheless. And after we got our sketch plan approved by the town of Alberta, the first engineer that we hired just stopped returning phone calls, and the one who took it through the sketch plat. So that went on for about a month and a half. I finally had to find another engineer to step in, who was the one that ended up taking it through the process for us. And so that was another, like I said, just twists in this deal that the last and greatest twist of all was the day before a scheduled closing in February of this year. I got a phone call from my surveyor. So that the new buyer, or the buyer for this, they wanted to have the Alta survey recertified to them. So they called our surveyor. Surveyor calls me and he goes, "We've got a problem." I went, "Wait, how can we have a problem? Honest to God, all you have to do is change the name on the title block from my client's name to the new buyer. And he goes, well, you would think that, but what we did was we did an aerial view of the property, and the neighbor built a road and 2 cul-de-sacs on the property.
Oh,
In the time that we had the Alta survey done in April, end of April of last year. So between April and January of this year, the neighbor had, without plans, without survey, without anything, extended 2 roads on his property into this property and built 2 cul-de-sacs
oh my goodness. You couldn't dream this
the
stuff up.
day before closing. So that the guys that are buying it are like, we can't get clear title with those. There's
With an
a flaw.
encroachment. Yeah.
I'm free. I called everybody I knew. My nephew lives down there. I had him teed up to go over and saw cut this road. Out of the blue, the land banker for the developer actually went to high school with the guy that built the road. He called this guy and said, hey, you're screwing up my deal. The guy that built the road in said, listen, go over, saw cut it a foot back, use a skid loader, push all the asphalt onto my property, do your closing, we'll fix it later.
Oh my goodness.
And so it delayed closing by a week, but that all got taken care of in like 2 days.
I'm going to use one word here,
And
and
it
that
was-
is serendipity. Like it's you are so lucky that somebody knew somebody that could help turn that around, right?
But at every stage, if you think, what could happen now? This. What could happen now? Well, this. So now I'm sending drones out like a month before. I want to, I need an aerial of the property. It's crazy stuff.
That is crazy. But I know from Arturo, because I did speak to him, that there was many times in that deal that he wanted to give up. He was like, this is too hard. But now he's like, at the end, it all worked out. And now he's ready.
Yeah, I didn't even
for
tell
more.
you. Actually, there was one other thing. So the developer, who was the first developer, he knew about a sewer extension fee. He neglected it. When it came time to pay, if he'd have done it when he was supposed to have, and he knew about it, it would have been $450,000. He waited. It ended up being $600,000. They went back to the builder and to Art, and they were like, well, you're going to have to pay. And we're like, no, dude, you screwed this up. And Art came in. I was like, you just need to get the deposit, take their deposit, and we'll find another builder. Art was so fed up. He goes, no, pay the $50,000. Let's just get this thing done.
Sometimes
So
you
at
just
the
got to
bitter end,
weigh
he
up
had
the
to
way
pay.
forward, right?
Yeah, at the bitter end, it cost them another 50 grand, but they made money. It was a good deal. Art swore to God he would never do another subdivision deal, and I'm working on 2 with him right now.
Amazing. Amazing. I always say that if you've got the wherewithal to work through the problems and the tough stuff, you will always succeed. So that's great. Hey, just on that same line, I think it's
Anytime.
interesting, right? From April through to January that actually happened. And Vanessa's got a question in here that probably leans into this. Her question is, are there time frames to keep in mind from once the lot is finished to when the building needs to start?
Well, that I don't, that's up to the buyer and the builder. For me, I'm more in getting them to the finish line so they can start. Generally speaking, the builders don't want a finished pad to sit out in the weather too long. Too much rain, too much anything is, lessens the capacity of the soil, the holding capacity and things like that. So generally they like to move pretty quickly, but I wouldn't, I don't know their time frames.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, good question though, Vanessa.
Yeah.
Steve said, how do we submit properties to you for consulting?
Everybody sends me stuff. Happy to look at it. AJ can give you my email or, contact.
I'll pop the
Shoot me a
email in the
text.
chat, guys.
I look at stuff. I look at stuff every day. I'm happy to.
Let me get that in the chat. Just whilst I'm putting this in the chat, has anybody got questions about David's example that he just went through? Okay, there's David's email, guys. So you've got that. And I've also put in the chat, guys, just a link to book a call with me. So if anybody's interested in getting more information about, because we've also got all MLS records as well. So on market, off market deals, all of that we can help you out with, which is great.
Yeah.
David, let's wrap up and continue with just a couple more questions just to round out the conversation. So I know you've got a lot of experience and your background, but for a typical person that doesn't have your experience, who should they expect to have on their team in order to get a subdivision done?
Well, if they're going to do it themselves, they're going to need and again, AJ, it depends. Is it a simple subdivision that you can do just with the surveyor? Is it something that is going to require a civil engineer? In many states, an engineer can do a subdivision. So that's something to keep in mind. If you've got a good plat, an engineer can do everything necessary to take it through. The other consultants, again, if you're doing wells and drain fields, you're going to need a soils scientist to verify the soils. Depending on the size of the subdivision and the location, you know, for me, I always have I do wetlands, geotech, environmental, and those are all separate consultants.
Yep.
In addition to a surveyor and an engineer.
Yep. So we're already at 5 people that I'm
land
counting.
planner. Yeah, at least. Yeah.
That's 6. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Quite a lot. Okay, good. That's excellent. And if someone wanted to consider starting doing anything around subdividing, where should they start, David, on their education, their knowledge, and really just getting around like what is needed to start to do some of these deals?
Yeah, I will tell you the same thing I tell everybody in most of these forums is read, not just willy-nilly reading. Read the zoning ordinance, read the subdivision ordinance. Most jurisdictions, those are separate documents. Some they're combined. If they use the Muni code, they're kind of combined, but find them. But read through it. It will tell you what the standards are.
Yeah.
And what you need to know. It will tell you minimum frontage requirements, minimum lot sizes. So my recommendation to anyone would be, if you want to do this, read about it, educate yourself about it. And I will say that helps when you're making a phone call to a jurisdiction. When you make that phone call to the jurisdiction, educate yourself in advance of that, because you do not want to ask a jurisdiction, what can I do here? You want to tell the jurisdiction what you read and how you intend to employ it. And then have them go, well, that's not our policy. Yeah. Because there's a difference between ordinance and policy. You know, ordinance is legislated, policy is dictated by the jurisdiction. And sometimes their policy conflicts with the written legislation.
Interesting. Yeah. I like that advice though. Go in fully armed with the information so that you're going to be taken seriously then as well, which I think is the main thing.
100%. Yes, that's what what I'm trying to say. You want them to know that you're educated and serious, not looking to them. And most jurisdictions bristle at someone going, what can I do? It makes them afraid to tell you anything other than read this section of the ordinance, read this section of the code. That they're not going to be as free with advice or direction as they would be if you tell them what you read, how you believe it's implied. Then they'll show you some nuance.
Love it. Great advice, David, to wrap it up. Absolutely great advice. Well, guys, I'm sure you've learned a lot on this call, as I have as well. So David's always really forthcoming with his information and sharing. Yeah, I agree, Steve. Thank you as well. David, we really appreciate your time, especially because you are
Anytime, AJ.
You're in a middle of a parking lot trying to get your car fixed and it's a heat wave. So we sincerely appreciate you. Guys, if you can just show golf clap or whatever you want to do, thumbs up, a bit of a
Thank you.
thank you to David for today and all of his knowledge. Everyone, thank you for your time, for coming on and learning. Vanessa, yeah, it was great. I agree. David's always very giving with his information. But folks, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay well, stay safe, stay cool if you're in a heat wave. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right. Take care, AJ. See you.
Thanks, David. Thanks so much.